sent out, or this email that I sent out to clergy this week about a riding lawnmower and some of the responses. They were really quite funny, and some of them were kind of nice. Like some of them took the opportunity to ask me how I was doing, which was really kind. My generic response is, you keep going as long as you can, as hard as you can, or as hard as you can, as long as you can. So I don't get too specific, but it's nice when people ask. There was another question that I was asked by two clergy who I don't think they would have called me because they're not in my area, but it was an interesting question to get, particularly for more than one. And the question was this: are you having services this summer? I sort of wondered why, and the reason is because there are more and more churches, and I think I might have mentioned this last week, more and more churches that are either closing for the summer or combining with other churches for the summer. I can't say that will never happen in this church. I can't say anything as an infinitive like that. But I cannot anticipate that ever happening in St. Mary's, certainly not while I'm here. It seems if we don't have time for worship, and if we don't have worship, what are we here for? What's it about? And that leads into what I want to talk about this morning a bit. And during the summer months, I'll keep the microphone on high because the type of sermon I'm going to do is the one where my voice tends to go softer. So I'll keep the mic at a decent level. But thinking of that, why are we here? What are we here to do? Reminds me of a question that I'm getting more and more from some parishioners, from non-Christian friends and acquaintances, from colleagues in ministry. And I say this at the risk of sounding self-aggrandizing because they're coming to me and asking me questions. It's not like that. It's like informal conversation. And it comes down to, generically speaking, the question of like, what are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to accomplish in ministry? I had that from a person who works at one of the seniors' residences we visit. And it wasn't asked as a sort of snotty question or a take shot at you question. It was asked of me as an individual who this person, she thinks I'm good at what I do at the residence and in doing a service. And she was asking me, why am I a minister? Why don't I just do that all the time? Because I enjoy it so much. And that indicated to me, because it wasn't asked with edge or attitude or to be snarky, that indicated to me that this individual, though she's grown up in what had once upon a time been called a nominally Christian country, just doesn't have the first notion of what the church is about or what the church is for. And I use that as one example. I could give you another 10 or 15, but we don't have time. People who are just saying, what are you trying to accomplish as a minister? Why are you spending your life doing this? With all the issues that St. Mary's has with its building and its budget, why? Why put so much energy and effort into it? And I hear this, and I try to understand where it's coming from, and I ask questions in return. And what I come up with is the following. The people have come to associate or equate Christianity and Christian ministry as basically doing good deeds. Remember the old Boy Scout pledge? It's right hand. My right hand doesn't work. I promise to do my best, to do my duty to God and the Queen, to keep the law of the wolf-cut pack, and to do a good turn every day. Isn't it amazing that I still remember that? So something about things that we learn when we're young, right? And it's sort of like that. The Christianity is equated with the Cub Scout promise, or the Girl Guide promise, or the Boy Scout, whatever. But I promise to do my best. Note the pronouns there. I promise to do my best, to do my duty to God and the Queen, to keep the law of the wolf-cut pack. That's external. And to do a good turn every day. Now, I'm not suggesting there's anything wrong with that as a promise. But if that's what Christianity is, then there's something big that is being missed. And it's the big being missed that I want to talk about. And the way I'm going to start talking about this, and I am very much aware that this is summertime, summer schedule, so I'm going to contract this. The way I want to start talking about it is in terms of how I understand ministry. And I will tell you, as some of you have heard this, maybe most of you have heard this, that when I was going through seminary, when I was going through ordination preparation, it was very much in the time of the social gospel, the social justice movement. Some of that emerging out of the Vietnam era, some of it, it cultural thing. And the social justice emphasis in the church seemed to be parallel to the basic ministry of the church. There were those who were interested in social justice. Some wonderful, wonderful people, you know. One who I tremendously admire, very little contact that I had with him, but he had so much wisdom that he couldn't talk without giving you something wise, and I probably have remembered about 5% of it. It was John Lee, Reverend John Lee, retired now. Amazing man, but he was very much into social justice. But social justice was considered side to the church. It wasn't considered basic to the church. Things like St. Michael's Mission, one of the oldest missions in Canada. A tremendous thing, faithfully done for centuries, in the basement, or the basement, I guess it is, of St. John the Evangelist Church downtown. Always something that we have supported and cared about, but sort of parallel to the ministry of the church, not integral to the ministry of the church. And so, it seems to me that when people have looked at the church, they've looked at what Christianity is about as something separate from some of the things that we do in the name of Christ. When people who don't know, or who only know a little bit, look at church, what do they see? They see liturgy, they see music, frankly, and I hope this doesn't sound snotty, but I'll say it anyway, often of very dubious origin, quality, and theology as well, without a whole lot of thought, and frankly, without a whole lot of preparation, tend to go on momentum. They see sometimes, fewer and fewer, but sometimes a choir dressed in robes that were designed last century or the century before that, or designed in the 60s, when everybody said, we have to have new robes. And so there are these shiny polyester things that look like something out of the age of Aquarius. I'm glad you found that amusing. I did when I put it in there. And it's kind of odd. And sometimes this choir, and please, like somebody who has no hair and what hair I have is white, I think I can say this now. Usually when the choir comes in and you're looking at the back of the heads, all you're seeing is silver, you know, or shine, glare, put on your sunglasses. And sometimes, in order to be trendy, these choirs try to do a piece of the new music. Something like, oh, seek ye first, or I am the bread of life, which are now over 40 years old. And there they are. And if they weren't doing so great on the traditional stuff, they're doing even less great on that stuff. It's like, why? And then the liturgy comes. And boy, am I going to get in trouble with this if anyone ever holds me to account on it. But I've got to tell you, most clergy, it's true to say, don't give a whole lot of thought to what's going to happen in the service or what the flow is going to be, or even what they're trying to accomplish. Just do the same thing every week, every week, every week, every week. And I'm sure if you ask clergy how long they spend preparing their sermons, you'll get an answer between 5 and 10 hours a week, because that's what you're supposed to say. But if you ask God how much time was spent preparing a sermon, it was probably between the appetizer and the dessert the night before. And it shows. And then you look at the churches. And the churches tend to be well enough together as a physical structure for the people who are there. Because we're at the point where it's our place and we love it. You know, it's sort of like that room in the house that never gets any attention. But it's part of our house, and we just sort of, we know it, and church is like that. But isn't it remarkable that, right, I don't know if it's over yet, but recently at Loblaws, Mer would come back complaining that she doesn't know where anything is because they're doing renovations. They only built the blessed place, what, 10 years ago, 15 years? And how much are they spending? And that's the world we're living in. Can you imagine going to a cinema these days and sitting in the seats that of the type that you and I sat in when we went to the cinema as kids? Nobody would go. You want a full bucket with a headrest. You don't think about who well his head being there, but nonetheless, it's got to be comfortable. The lighting has to be right, even if there are commercials on the screen. And so people look at the church and they see one thing, they look at the rest of their life and they see something else. And then they see that there are people who call themselves Christians or ministers who do stuff in the world to help people and to be nice. And they wonder, well, why don't you just do the helping? Spend all your time doing the helping and forget all that other stuff that is totally meaningless or totally irrelevant to their existence. And you know why that is? It's because generally in the church, and of course it comes down to us leaders, probably more than anyone else, but I think we're all, to some degree, culpable. You do a terrible job of explaining what it is we do and why it is that we do it. I've referred to this priest, Marty Patterson, Anglican priest evangelist, who I met years and years and years ago. And he was, again, one of these people who would, in the middle of a talk that was very good, but ordinary good, he would throw in something, and it's just like it would hit you like something, and it just sticks. And one of the things that Marty said in one of his talks that was absolutely brilliant, he says, Christians must always be prepared, anywhere, anytime, to give an answer to the question, what is the reason for the hope that you have in you? And that's stuck with me. And I think that's something to look at. Because we live, well, let me just read it for you, because we prayed it this morning. O God, our defender, storms rage about us. I don't think they're referring to Alberta right here, but anyway. Storms rage about us and cause us to be afraid. There's a lot of afraid people. Rescue your people from despair. Deliver your sons and daughters from fear. And preserve us all from unbelief. That was our prayer today. And while I have said numerous times in the past, I think the people who put together the collects in the traditional prayer book really had a lot of wisdom. Every now and then I think there's wisdom in some of these collects too, these new ones. In fact, more than every now and then. Storms rage about us. I don't think we have to look too far. Maybe we don't even have to look to the left or to the right to see someone about whom a storm is raging. And I know it's a metaphor, but y'all understand it. Health, finances, relationship. What else? We're not at the point yet where we're talking end times with floods in Alberta or Europe or whatever. There's a lot of people that are, anyway, I won't go there. Storms rage about us. And the result of the storm is they cause us to be afraid. Now, I came that they might have love. I came that they might have joy. And I came to give peace that passes understanding. Peace that transcends the immediate realities of the circumstance. Not that we deny the realities of the present circumstances, but the peace of Christ transcends them. Causes us to be afraid. Peace. Do you remember when the disciples were afraid? They were on a storm-tossed sea in this boat, and Jesus had decided to take a nap. And we could say how centered he was, or who was his yoga master, or whatever, if you want. But Jesus was very centered. He was asleep, and they were panicking. They were freaking out because they thought they were going to drown. And he woke up and says, "What's the matter?" And I have this feeling that whatever the Hebrew is for it, what Peter did at that moment was go. I'm not going to do it in the mic. Was go, duh! And Jesus basically said, peace, peace. Wouldn't it be great if whenever a storm was raging around us, or somebody that we love, we were to say, peace. And it didn't just shut them up. All of a sudden, in their heart, in their gut, wherever these things grow, began to grow something that just caused them to, the serotonin and the dopamine goes down to normal. All those other chemicals that we shoot when we're in a state of panic, adrenaline, our blood pressure reduces, the vessels dilate, the heart rate slows down, we don't feel like we need to go to the bathroom desperately. All those things that happen when stops. And Storms rage about us and cause us to be afraid. And what Jesus does is come into the midst of that and say, peace. And that's what the church is supposed to do. And that's what we're supposed to do. Rescue your people from despair. Isn't it interesting this prayer says, rescue your people from despair? I think that's wisdom. It's not only people out there. The people who don't believe don't know God. It's us too. We're still human. Sometimes maybe too human. Maybe we should demonstrate more of the divine character. I'm sure we all should. But rescue your people from despair. Isn't it interesting that it doesn't say something like this? This is wise. It doesn't say, give us the ability to transcend despair. Think of the image of rescue. And I'm going to go back to, this is bad. I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to anyway, because with all the floods in Calgary and all the rest of it. Do you remember that? It's not funny in the circumstance, but it was in the sermon. I'm going to do it anyway. Stop apologizing, or just do it. Do you remember that story about this town that had experienced a flood? And there was a man on the roof of his house hoping for a rescue. And he was saying, God save me, God save me. And somebody comes by in a rowboat. John! And the guy's thinking, God will save. And the thing goes on. And eventually the flood waters rise and he drowns. And he goes to heaven. God, I'm a child of yours. I prayed to you. I prayed that you would rescue me, and you didn't. Why not? Said, come on, man. I sent you a lifeboat. I sent you a helicopter. What more do you want? And it's like that. Boy, do I tell jokes badly. But rescue your people from despair. What we're asking for here is an outside intervention to come into the midst of the struggles of our lives. Not, God, I can do this. Just goose it a little. Rescue. We're assuming that like when Jesus called Peter out of the boat, got the water image, right? Called Peter out of the boat. And when Peter kept his eyes on Jesus, he was fine. But then when he looked away, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this, started to sink. And Jesus had to reach down and rescue him. And we're saying, rescue your people from despair. And then it says, deliver your sons and daughters from fear. I'm 57 years old and I'm still learning stuff. One of the things that I'm learning, how's that for an obvious thing? One of the things that I'm learning is the power of fear to mess up your life. Fear and all its ugly cousins. Anxiety, stress, insomnia, indigestion. I have no idea what that was. Whatever it was. But it actually sounded like there's a bird hitting the window. But please do check her. Okay, now refocus. Where was I? All these things. Fear and all its ugly cousins. And one of the things that I found in ministry, particularly in pastoral counseling, one of the hardest things to do is to get people to identify the source or the experience of their fears. When you say you're afraid of something or we've identified that there's an issue, what's really going on here? And what is the effect it's having on you? We're not very much in touch with that. But in sleeplessness, anxiety, all these stress-related things, what we're talking about is that there's fear going on here. And what we're asking God to do in this prayer is to deliver us from fear. Not to make the fear better, or to help us cope with it, but to deliver us from our fear. Okay, the time is short, so I gotta cut this. But what I'm getting at here is, when we look at the college for today, it seems to me that what we've got is something that really clearly defines what are supposed to be the results of living as a Christian and being a part of a Christian community. That as a Christian, and as part of a Christian community, whatever the storms that are raging about, that God will come into that with us. That He will rescue us from the consequences of all of that. That He will deliver us from all the consequences of that. Then He goes on to preserve us all from unbelief. That's a sermon for another thing. But God will step into our lives as individuals and as a community and cause us to experience something different. And I gotta ask, if when people who don't know were to see that in the life of Christians and the Christian church, if they would still ask the question, why do you bother? Like, just be a nice person and do good things. Because you see, Christianity, the doing the good things, the being a nice person, is not a cause, it's an effect. It's a result of the faith that we have and that we hold on and that we cherish. And as we step into that reality, as we step into the experience of God coming into our lives, and I know it's a hackneyed word, but transforming them, as we step into the experience of God stepping into our lives and transforming them, which means transforming our experience of our experiences, what we do is we begin to show a different lifestyle, a different way of living. That's what God calls the church to be, The church, God calls the church, which is us, to be different, to be a different society on this planet. And when the church actually is that, it is transforming. Well, there's one other aspect, and I don't have time to develop it. It's going to be for another time soon. Yes, it's about being transformed by the grace of God, empowering us and transforming us to live in the world and make a difference in the world through Christ, not just because we're nice people. There's another thing. Another reason why we do what we do is because God is holy. He's holy. And as such, He's deserving of our loyalty. Let's pray.
Amen.
God, there are indeed so many songs that speak of your holiness. Help us to avoid just keeping the words of holiness as just words. Open our hearts and our spirits to see and to know you as our holy God. Help us to open our hearts and our minds, particularly the dark parts that are shuttered off and closed off, to open our hearts and minds to your grace that doesn't come just when we deserve it, because we don't, but when we need it, sometimes when we're not even aware of it. God, lower our blood pressure and our serotonin and dopamine levels, and our cortisol particularly. That's the anxiety one. Release the tension and the stress in our muscles. Help us to put our trust in you, not in a foolish way or an empty way, but through a sense that you really are there on our side. In Jesus' name, amen.